So today we are going to be continuing to work on the contact manager that we started a couple of weeks ago now, maybe even a month ago. Seems like I've been doing this forever now. And we walked through three IDEs, Visual Studio Code, and JetBrains Writer, which I'll be using for the rest of this. The idea behind the application was to start with bare minimum, pretty much file new, and then move from there. So we started off building the domain models around the context. So this is what we want to kind of pass around. We then worked on a business layer, which has the ability to create, add, update clients and or contacts. We then moved on to the data layer and added SQLite database and a framework, and then looked at how we could migrate data to it. We then worked on creating unit tests and introduced poor person's dependency injection. Later on today, if not tomorrow, we will introduce a quote-unquote real dependency injection. We then created some mocks to do it. Hey, Peter Ritchie from the phone app. Just couldn't get it working on your desktop. After we created the mocks, we then worked on looking at our code coverage. And last Tuesday, we kind of built out the data maps for our application. So instead of just using the domain classes, we have a separate instance of our models for the data. It's not as important right now, but in probably sometime next week, we're going to go and move away from SQLite and use another backend repository. As such, we're going to probably want to tweak the models a little bit to kind of adhere to how we're going to store the data. But we don't want to mess up the user interfaces or the APIs as a result. So we kind of did some of that work up front last stream on Tuesday. Today we're going to focus on exposing our application. So take our application now that is just a series of class libraries and turn it into, or not turn it into, but add a web API endpoint to it. So our web API endpoint is going to be based off of this sample, which I will post in the contact outline later on today as a reference point. Because I'm using a different machine, I've yet to figure out how to do copy paste here and paste it on the machine that is streaming. Although I could do some inception like stuff and do something like this. Paste it quickly and then run out of the stream so we don't get stream inception. That was not bad. When I did it before, I had the speech on or the microphone on, and I kept getting back and forth vibrations or reverb echoing. So we're going to base the API based on this sample. Now we're not going to use the example word for word because we don't have a to-do list app, but I found that this set of documentation is really helpful at creating your basic, what's called CRUD application for create, read, update, and delete. And since that's what our main application does, we are going to do that. So by the end of this stream, hopefully, we will have at least these 5 methods. We'll have a get, where we can get a list of all the contacts, a get where we can get a specific contact, a post where we can add a new contact, a put where we can update an existing contact, and then a delete to remove a contact. If you've been part of this stream at all, you know we actually have some of that in this test application that we built earlier. So our contact console app does a lot of that for us. It does a get specific, get all. We're probably not going to do the search. And then there's this add and delete here which are commented out because we didn't want to touch the database. So essentially, we're going to find a way to handle this with our API. And I got the code coverage running. Let me do the last thing I always want to do at the beginning of every stream, run the unit tests to make sure they are really there. What's bothering your eyes, Peter? Was it the white background of that stream or just my face? Guess if he's referring to this, I could set this to the dark theme somewhere. Oh, I actually have to sign in to do that, but then there's the ability for me to change it to a dark theme. I have yet to customize Chrome for dark themes because not every web page, yeah, not every web page behaves the same. And this little sprinkle here is bothering me, so let me fix this stream to get rid of that haziness. I was talking to someone earlier today. I was on a stream with Telerik and on the Code It Live stream, and was saying how every time I do this stream, I have to mess around with the filters to get my face right. It seems as if the lighting in my room changes quite regularly, and I need to adjust it to get rid of that background noise. Hopefully it'll get rid of it. And let's see if I can shrink this down to 200, 220, 230. There we go. Now hopefully that's a little bit, oh no, still pretty bad. Let me go and clean up the properties. I think I went a little too extreme on it. Chroma key. I've yet to find enough, but now it all of a sudden magically works at the rate I want to do it. 430 usually works well. There it goes, that's better. So all these are commented out. I ran the unit test. All the unit tests passed, which is great. So now we are going to go forward and add it. So let's start with the contacts. We're going to right click on it and choose add eventually. And I forgot to mute my cell phone. So let me go and mute that so that people don't keep on doing these. So I'm going to do add new project, and then we are going to want to choose ASP.NET Web Core Application. It sounds so fancy when I say it that way. Let's go and do that. And then the type you want is what really matters here. So we can create an empty project, and that pretty much just gives us the program and the startup. But I'm kind of lazy and don't want to type a lot of the stuff, so I'm going to do a built-in web API template. So once you do that, you can choose your language. You can't choose the framework. Well, technically you can, but I only have ASP Core 3.1 installed on the machine. And then it's going to want to know if you want to add authentication to it. You have three options. You can do individual, which goes across to Azure Active Directory, or you can do your own internal or say Windows authentication. Right now we're going to do no authentication, and in a coming stream we're going to go and look at how we can add that. So let's go and name this application. So be consistent with everything else we did. I am going to name this contacts.api. There's no point in me putting the web in front of this because we kind of know it's a web API. Click on create. Wait a couple of seconds, and we get a API project. The API project is red right now because none of these files are added. So I will add them to Git, and then they are all there. So now they're nice and green. Now by default, it comes with a model for a web forecast, which has date, time in Celsius, then the conversion to Fahrenheit, and then a summary text, and then a sample controller with the weather forecast, and it just does a random thing. Well, I am going to say goodbye to that like we did in all of our other ones and kick it off that we don't want your stinking template for this. And that's because we are going to go and create our own. Now we have a basic app that has nothing to it. There are some default out of the box settings that we'll look at. Right now it just sets the logging level and this other parameter called allowed host. This is a way for IIS or the web server to know what request inbound you want to allow. This particular case, we're going to say everything. And then you have specific database settings. I have to choose that I wanted to accept the certificates. I thought I did that already. Now, the interesting thing about this is if you haven't done any ASP.NET Core applications, you'll notice that there is a program and a startup now, slightly different than what we're used to in the past. So we look at our program, essentially it has two lines to it. It creates the submain, which is very similar to our console app here. It has a submain. This is essentially the entry point for our application. This create host builder tells it exactly what to do. So it's saying, here, I want you to create a host. If we look at the using, the host is going to be part of Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.hosting. And then I want you to create a default builder. If we hover over and look at the IntelliSense, it says initializes a new instance of the host builder class with pre-configured defaults. Essentially, this gets started and loads up everything that's here. So you see that there's an I configuration that's provided, command line arguments. It looks at app settings.json and app settings.environment. User secrets, environment, pretty much every particular part. Then it goes with a default logger factory. So this is just the out-of-the-box behavior. And you can wire up your own by changing the, or not calling the host defaults, but that's totally fine for us now. So once we create the defaults, we're saying, okay, now create a web host and use the startup with the class called startup. So let's go take a look at the startup class. Startup class takes in something called an I configuration. The I configuration is the configuration objects. If you remember from the previous file where we set defaults, this is ASP.NET Core's way of building out all the configuration items. So it's going to look at the app settings.json that I have highlighted here, the app settings.development.json, and then it's going to look at the environment variables. It's going to look at command line parameters. We can do a whole entire talk around configuration, and we might actually do that in an upcoming stream. But right now, just assume it's going to read this, and this is all we are going to care about. So it uses something called Dependency Injection, which we talked about 2 or 3 streams ago, to pass in all those parameters. So you know that you notice that I'm not doing anything with configuration. I'm saying, hey, ASP.NET Core, you give me the configuration information, and then I'll work with it. And that's kind of what this does here. Later on in other classes, you see we are going to add logging and our contact manager as dependencies. So here the first step is we need to configure services. So the only service we have right now is the add controllers. So this tells ASP.NET Core that we want to add controllers to it. So it's going to do all the wiring up to take the API / whatever controller we add. And we'll cover controllers in a few minutes. After that, you'll see a method called configure. What configure does is actually tells us how we're building up the application. So it's passed in two parameters, which ASP.NET Core does for us. Passes in the application builder, and this is the application that we're ultimately going to run. So it's going to be the web server that we're creating, and we're doing it through code as opposed to lots of configuration items. And then the iWeb host environment is the environment that ASP.NET Core is running in. And we use that for certain variables, like whether HTTPS is enabled, what server it's running on in case we need to access local resources. So the first couple lines you'll see we have the environment.is development. And this is a critical first step because this enables what used to be called the yellow screen of death in ASP.NET. This allows us as developers to see problems if we are in the development environment. And the way it knows we're in development environment is a couple of different ways. You can do it by changing environment variables within your Windows or Mac PC, or you can do it in properties. If we look at our properties for the API, under the, I believe it's properties tab, we will see an environment section in here somewhere. Helps if I can spell environment in no case. Nope, it's not there. Where is it? Application. Assembly. It's slightly different in Writer than it is in Visual Studio. In Visual Studio, you can right-click and see it. And I'm trying to find where it is in Writer. Photo is actually here. Let's see. I can't do a find in here. Pop it up. I'll have to look up where it stands, but we can usually find it here. I think if I do a find in solution in Writer, I can see that. And what is your shortcut? Edit, find. Why is find grayed out? Edit, find. Huh. That's weird. Oh. Yeah, it's just going to show it here. If we look at this area, we can do environment, ASP.NET Core, and Writer just to see where it is. You can also do this with the application configuration. I'll have to play around with it, but we're not going to bother changing environments for a while, so I wouldn't worry about that right now. Right, it's just by default assumes we're in development mode. Then we're going to turn on HTTPS redirect, which says if someone gives us a recall to or a call to HTTP dot whatever, it's going to automatically send the 301 redirect to HTTPS. After that, we're going to use the default ASP.NET routing, and we'll look at ways that we can change that later on. We're going to use authorization. Right now there's no authorization configured, so it's going to allow everything in there. And then we are going to, for endpoints, use the controller endpoint. So by convention, it's going to use the controller name for what's called the route. Let's go through here and create a new controller. So we do add existing item or a new class interface, or I can do new controller altogether. I'm just going to do class interface, and let's call this context controller. By convention, you typically name your controllers with the word controller afterwards, and the root of it is the pluralized version of the name, so contacts dot controller. And I want to make sure I'm right in that because that doesn't sound right to me. Blah 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 blah. So I'm going to open up my sample app that I worked on and do a little bit of cheating. You can always disappeared because I didn't click enter. So let's do contacts controller. Yes, I want to add it. Black screen. This takes a second. I've learned that when I'm opening up another instance of Rider while I'm streaming, it tends to take a little bit of time and then come up with a black screen. I don't know if it's a redraw issue for it, but eventually it comes back. Let's take a look at this sample API. But yep, it's pluralized, and then we have everything else here. I'm just going to cheat and copy out this text to save you having to do it. So you'll notice we have two new attributes. One is called API controller, and this is telling ASP.NET Core that we are building out an API endpoint. We're also telling it that the route of this endpoint, you should use the controller name, and that's what this template is. The bracket controller tells us to use the name. So it's going to go and essentially create a context thing. So our URL is going to be something like localhost and then some random port number / contacts. And then we'll be able to access all of our contacts from there. So let's create our first method. And if we looked at our diagram here, the first one that most people create is called the getAll. So let's go and create the getAll. So what we want to do is tell it that we are going to do an HTTP GET. So this is going to expose the contacts method with a GET method. So if we were to go to that URL that I listed before, which let me just keep here in comments for now, and we're going to get so sick of seeing this URL. I don't know what the port number is, so we'll change it. So if we just go to this URL, this is the method that's going to be called right now. So let's create a method for it, public. And I think we want to return a list, and it's complaining that we're missing lists. So I added the system collections injections, and we are going to want to obtain a list of domain. Let's do it the full name so it finds out about it. We'll ultimately call this get contacts. Now, if we want to fix this red, if I go over it, it doesn't see that. Why don't you see that? you should see a reference to it, and I should automatically be able to add the reference. I had virtually no luck with that, so I'm going to manually add the reference. Usually it's pretty smart at finding the reference for me. Where do I want to go? Dependencies, add reference, and then we're going to add a reference to the domain. Now I can get rid of this. So what do we want to do with the domain? We want to return a new domain. Actually, it's not even domain, it's contacts dot logic. So we're going to need to import this class too. So let's go back to our references and add a reference to the logic. So now I should have return, and then I think I put it in contacts.logic.contact manager. And this I need to new up here. So I'm going to do var contacts manager equals logic.domain.contacts manager, or actually let's create a new one here. New. And then this wants the repository for it since we did repository. So I'm going to just do new contact repository. And then that wants a data store. So I'm going to do a new SQLite data store. So now we have the contact application or the contact manager built. That's kind of messy, and we're going to show you in a minute, once I get this working, how you can go about cleaning this up. So ASP.NET will populate what that SQLite data store is, what that contact repository is, and ultimately the contact manager. But for now, I just want to return contact manager.getContacts, and we're going to pass in no data. So if I successfully run this project, we should get a list of contacts that are in our database. Now let us hope I got it right on the first time. Oh, I'm pretty sure I don't want to run IIS Express. We are going to have to create a new configuration because I'm running on a Mac and it doesn't have IIS Express. Let's go and do a new one. And we are going to do a new launch profile settings. And then we want to say that, oh, here's the environment variable. Damn it, I knew I had it somewhere. We are going to want to say that we want to launch the Contacts API project, and then what environment variable do we want for it. And this is going to be our port number 5000 and what URL we want to run. Fortunately, unfortunately, Rider does not have the ability to edit these things right in here. We have to go to the editor. So I'm just going to click OK for this, and then we're going to go straight to the editor and rename it. So if you go to the properties, you should see the launch settings for it. So I am going to keep this here only because if you're working on a Windows box, you need something else. We want the default to be contacts for this, so let's get rid of that. Weather, contacts. Now we should be good to go. And I think that, oh, it's still got it as unnamed. I got to rename that. Let's name it something else. Let's call it launch project, launch contacts. This This name doesn't mean anything by default. It's just more so for us because it appears up here. In Visual Studio, you'll get, a debug toolbar that has this. So now if I hit play on this, we should be able to ultimately get to our contacts API, assuming everything worked. And it ran, and there we go. Now we exposed our API to the world by adding the web API. And by the world, I mean my local desktop. Ultimately, we'll go and tweak this. So here we have every contact in here. We can validate that a couple of different ways. Let's go back, and like we've been doing for some of the others, we're going to go through and take a look at the database and see that we have 1, 17, 19, and then every other odd number up to 33. So look here, I got 1, 17, 19, 21, 23, 25, 27, 29, 31, and 33. So everything is returned. Now if I want to add additional items, I can go and do that. So let's go and do a separate API endpoint to get a specific record. So I am going to do something like this. Now if I try and run this, ASP.NET Core is going to complain because I have two things declared as HTTP GET. So I need to tell it what I want it to get, or which one is a GET without parameters and which one is a GET with parameters. Unfortunately, I don't remember what the syntax is, so we can go and take a look at our sample that we built this application on to find out what the text is for it. So we can go here and take a look at it. It is HTTP GET ID. So the name you use here does not matter. You can call it ID, you can call it contact, you can call it whatever you want. The key thing to remember is this name needs to match this parameter, because it will do some behind the scenes magic and automatically map this to the right method here. So if I want this to be ID or contact ID to be consistent, I should do this. Or I could have done this and just leave it as ID. Either case works. And then I need to just change this to ID. And this should return just a contact. Now you also notice I didn't have to deal with any of the JSON or anything like that. The ASP.NET Core kind of takes care of that for me out of the box. So if I save this and rerun it, goes back, it opens up a new instance. By default, this is what I set to it. If I just want to see number 17, I do a /17, and I only get the 17th record. If I do number 16, which doesn't exist, I'll probably get, oh, I typed in 17. If I do the 16, which probably doesn't exist, why am I not getting anything? I should get a runtime exception. I'm probably getting something behind the scenes, but I can't see it. So let's go to our developer tools and look at the request. So if I go to sources, or actually I can do network, come back here and change it to 2, hit enter. I get a 204 because why did it refresh to 17? I don't know why it went back to 17. It automatically is going back to 17 for some reason. 501 contact slash 3333, which I know doesn't exist. There you go. I got a send an empty response back. I don't know why that particular tab was caching. If I go to developer tools, network, and hit refresh, I should get a 404 here. And where is it? Console sources. I'm not getting anything. It's a little rough to debug with the API and the new Chrome tools. Easier way to do it nowadays is using something like Postman, or Writer has the built-in ability for us to do that with a what's called a scratch file. So I can go and create a new scratch file and turn it into HTTP request. And then I can use $3 that kind of separates the request. And then you could add in comments. So get all contacts. And then this should run local host 5000. Now let's do the full URL slash contacts. And then if I want to do a get existing contact, do HTTPS local hosts. It's actually 5001, I think, right? Yeah, 5000 is unsecure, 5001 is secure by default. Contacts /1, and then get non-existing contact HTTPS local host 5001 /contact /9999999. Now within ReSharper Writer or JetBrains Writer, you'll see I get these little $sign. So as long as it's still running, I can execute any one of these requests or all these requests. I'm just going to run them all right now to see what happens. I'm going to run with the default environment. Yes, accept it. So I see each of the requests ran. They came back in 0 milliseconds. I wish I can write a request that quickly. And for the first one, I get an HTTP 200. If I double click on this, I believe I can see, where is it? It generated a dummy JSON file that I should be able to see. How do I see you? Checking with right click to see if there's anything there. Oh, sorry, it's actually up here. I should have direct access to that file. Where did it go? I think it goes into a temp directory locally. I don't know why I can't see it. I'll find out where it goes in a minute. If I look at this one and check out the 4, I get a response body is empty because I get a 204, meaning that there was no content. I could return a 404, which would show web page not found. Depending on who you talk to, there's different syntax or different different schools of thought for what the HTTPS status code should be. I wonder why I can't see this. Should be able to see that response right from here. Let's see, is there a toolkit here? Soft wrap, soft end, print, garbage. Zooming in here to see if I can find a way. It generates files for you, and then you should be able to just see those files here. No. Let's just do a quick search and on my computer and see if I can find it anywhere. Bye for a second, TweetDeck. I want to say it generated it. Nope, not there. Let's check the project directory for where it was. There is a scratch folder where stuff ends up. What are we working on? The contacts application. Source. API. Huh. Next thing to do is let's go and phone a friend. Where writer store HTTP responses. See if I can find it in here. That's how you run it. Don't need to know how to run it. Don't need to know how to debug it. We've already attached the files. So that's not it. Let's see, what is that thing called? http-request log.http. So let's see if I can search for that. HTTP request log JetBrains writer. Created the request file, move a request, compose a request, open a request collection, convert. Those are all view responses. HTTP request directory. So there it is. So let's go back here. And then we should have a writer directory, which we can't see here. So let's go here under idea contacts, idea, HTTP requests, and there are our files. So if I look here and let's say open it with text edit, I should see the contacts. So it saves the files and we can go back and rerun these whenever we want to. So there should be a link here. I could have sworn, there it is. Is that it? I saw this little dash. I wonder if that was the way to get to it. I could have sworn there was a way for us to get to it directly within here or here. But in either case, it doesn't matter. So let's go and look at the next item in the list. So as you see, we had to kind of copy and paste and delete all this stuff out of here. We don't really want to do that. But because we only have like 15 minutes left, we'll probably create one or two more endpoints. And then for the next stream, we'll see how we can clean up this really dirty, nasty looking contact manager using some of the ASP.NET Core dependency injection. So let's go with a post to what do we have? Save contact, I think, is next on the list. We can do get contacts for search, but I'm not going to bother with that right now. Let's do with the save contact. Yep, wrong one. So where are you? Program, API, controllers, contact controller. We can minimize you for now. Here we want to do an HTTP post. And we don't need any method parameters for it because it's going to automatically kind of build this. So we want to return the object. Well, I don't remember what our option is. So I'm just going to do void for now because I don't remember what we return. Save contact, and we're going to pass in a domain. Models.contact, and then let's copy out this long busy piece, and then we should be able to do return contact manager dot save contact, and I got to give you a name or a parameter name there, buddy. Contact, and then call this contact, and let's see, what do you return? Yeah, I don't want that. What is our contact model? Save. So let's do go to implementation, and it returns a Boolean true or false. So I can do two different things here. I can do var was saved equals that, and then return a save, a true or false. Or I can tell it to return an action result. I think it's action result to a location. So yes, I want to do an action result, and then I'm going to return this. So let's do an action result. What that does is that's going to change the kind of URL, give us a pointer to where we want to go. So it's going to say, in a lot of cases, HTTP 202 or 203, that contact or the resource was created, or maybe 301, I don't remember the number, but give us the actual URL to the resource. So I'm going to do if was saved, and I actually want to call this saved. And then let's paste in the other text. So we're going to return a created at. We want to call this get contact. And then the ID is going to be contact dot contact ID. This is the contact. And why are you complaining? Because it doesn't see the created at action. We'll come back to that in a second. The other item we want to do is what happens in the event that it wasn't successfully saved. Well, there is an action result for problem. So we are going to return a problem. It's a good thing this audio is one way, so everyone's not going to say, but Joe, you're the problem. Why are you not working? Where is this out of? Is it part of this namespace? What namespaces do I have? No, I already got that namespace. Extensions, logging. Where is that? Trying to see what namespace is in so I can make sure I include it. I don't know why it's not showing. Object result. It is in the ASP.NET Core MVC. Oh, because this is not returning, this is not implementing the controller, so it doesn't have access to that property. Now those should be good. Failed to insert contact. So what this is now saying, we're going to try to create a contact. Create a new instance of the contact manager. Try to save it. If I successfully saved it, I'm going to return a new URL with a pointer to that object. If not, I am going to return a fail to save. So let's go back to our Scratch application. We're going to have to probably restart our service. So let's just do that in the meantime. And then we are going to create two more. Save valid contact. And then save invalid contact, just to show that both work. Now the syntax for this is slightly different because we're not just doing a basic get, we're doing a post. So I believe, where is my scratches for this? I believe, where'd you go? Where'd you go? I have a set of scratches for here too. Where are you? Be easy if I can see it, right? Oh, I just need to go to here because all the scratches are in one location in Rider. So I can go here. Maybe not. Anyway, those are all gets. Those are all gets. And that's the one I'm currently working on. Why are you not showing to me? I do have a valid post somewhere, and I really hate to type it all up and look it up. Let's close you. And this I am going to do. Good way of doing it is to go examples and do a post. And it creates an example for you or shows you lots of the different examples. And that's really how I learned how to do it. So again, that was click here, examples, and then choose the type you want. So I'm just going to copy this out. Go to my Scratch, paste this in here, and do localhost 5001/contacts, and we are going to post JSON. And what does the contact look like? So we are going to grab a copy of the domain from it, and I think I can just do paste as JSON, but the only fields that are required are this, so I'm just going to copy out these fields now and paste them here. ignore all this dirtiness for now. We will clean it up. Usually once you have one of these, you can just copy and paste. We don't want a contact ID because we should get one of those. So let's do contact first name. And we're going to set that equal to Peter, since Peter is on the call right now. And then I want last name equals Richie. And then his middle name equals, oh, let's use something funny. Hector is his middle name, and his email address equals don't mail at example.com. Little fun fact, if you do example.com, it does not work because there is no such domain name as example.com. It's a given, it's a name that is used for testing all around the internet. So you can put anything at example.com and it should work. And I had the syntax wrong, so it really messed up the look and feel. This, so let's go and clean it up a little bit. Why are you complaining? Why are you complaining? What is wrong with my, oh, everything has to be in quotes. So there we go. If I post this one, everything should be fine. Now I am going to post or put a different one in here for the future. In this one, we are going to have the first name blank because we know that that is a required field. So now my web application is started. I hit run. I get an HTTP 201 response. And then notice here in the location, I get a new URL. It's telling me to go to HTTP blah, 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 blah for your contact. In our particular case, I did nothing with the, excuse me, need to hydrate. In our particular case, I didn't do anything with the contact, so it doesn't know what ID it should return. And if we go back and look at our contact manager method in the logistics, save contact only returns a true or false. We probably are going to want to modify this to go back and return a full contact, or at least the contact ID, so that when we have a call to save contact, we can get the actual representation of the number. And just one more test to make sure that this works, then we'll come back. I'll check this in to GitHub, and then we will work on it on Monday or Tuesday stream to kind of clean up that contact, as well as introduce dependency injection to it. So let me go here, and for some reason I didn't copy out the URL, so I'm going to do HTTPS local host 5001/contacts, hit run localhost, and I get a 500 because we threw an exception that the argument was null And because we are in ASP.NET development environment, I'm getting the full entire stack trace to my API, which in this case returns argument null exception first name is required. Ideally, we'd want to just return the problem record for it. And that's about all we have for today, folks. Hopefully you've learned something. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out in the chat. I'll be monitoring for a minute or two. The source code for everything you can find in this repository. That's what we've been working on. I'll update the Git repo today after this chat, along with that sample API, and I'll put in the contacts HTTP scratch file in case you want those posts. That being said, that is all I had for you. Hopefully you have a great day and learn something. See you soon.